Hello. In view of many comments that are being sent along to us by people who watch the videos, I'm getting more and more concerned that some of us seem to have lost all faith that we can interpret Bible prophecy at all, and some have abandoned the quest. Some have become more emphatic that they know the answers, and that I find this very strange. Many of them seem to think that the answers they personally have come to are better not only than the Watchtower's answers, but all the answers ever given by the church. And I don't think they have a concept of just how much attention prophecy has claimed among great thinkers, great theologians over the centuries. Many of them have become as preoccupied and even more, certainly more scholarly, but more devoted to the subject of prophecy. So I want to do several videos on this, but this one, starting with some basic tools that have helped me and Vivian over the 3 decades we've been out to orient ourselves when it comes to Bible prophecy. And they come from various perspectives. We showed you recently John Walvoord's book in one of the videos on Revelation, Prophecy Knowledge Handbook, all the prophecies of Scripture explained in one volume. Walvoord is very emphatically a dispensational theologian, but he's a good one. He's a good theologian, and he's fair to those he disagrees with. So this is a good starting point. Prophecy Knowledge Handbook by John Walvoord. Similarly, there's this older book, The Second Coming Bible, which I think has been renamed in the last decade or two, something like the Millennium Bible, but keep this name in mind, William Biederwolf. Biederwolf did this going through, I'll read you the subhead here, the complete text of every scripture passage concerned with the second coming of Christ, plus commentary on each verse. And when he does commentary on each verse, he gives you direct quotes from many of the great prophetic expositors of the past, from different camps. So I found this a great help. So if you can get 2 books, these might be the good starting point. Mr. Biederwolf, Second Coming Bible, and John Walvoord, Prophecy Knowledge Handbook. Also, there's this one, which did disappoint a lot of conservatives when it came out, although Barton Payne is a conservative. Encyclopedia of Biblical Prophecy. Such a thing, I don't believe it ever been attempted before. And so, of course, when people were disappointed with it, it was a deeper magnitude of disappointment. What it claims to be, though, is a complete guide to scriptural predictions and their fulfillment. So Payne's emphasis is not so much upon future prophecy as about fulfilled prophecy, which seems to be a lot less thrilling to most of us than it should be, considering this is the chief apologetic use that prophecy was put to in the early church to demonstrate, for instance, that Jesus Christ was indeed the Messiah. So fulfilled prophecy, if we're going to go anywhere and be emphatic about the use of prophecy, surely it should be about that which proves the credibility of Scripture, rather than that which potentially at least could threaten the credibility of Scripture, such as going out on limbs about the future. So I think Payne's emphasis was the right emphasis. Now, if you want books about the particular views of the Millennium, I did advocate this one in one of our Revelation videos too. This book, The Meaning of the Millennium, 4 views, edited by Robert Clouse, basic. In this, George Eldon Ladd, Herman Hoyt, Lorraine Bettner, and Anthony Hoekema represent the principal 4 positions on prophecy and the interpretation specifically of future prophecy. And those 4 positions are premillennial, dispensational, postmillennial, and amillennial. Now, not only do these 4 theologians get a chance to expand upon the basis of their positions, but they also get a chance to answer and deal with each other's positions. So it's more like a debate, the setup of this book. Then there's some books that specialize on the history of prophetic interpretation. You've probably seen our videos lately on the history of interpretation in general, the history of Humpty, and the other series we did on Humpty Dumpty interpretation is done by the Watchtower. These are some books that show that the embarrassment is not only with the cults. When it comes to prophetic speculation, there were groups going out on a limb long before the cults came along. Marjorie Reeves, for instance, talks about the influence of prophecy in the later Middle Ages. She deals specifically in here with Joachimism. Joachim was a Catholic monk who is credited often with the beginning of modern prophetic interpretation, premillennial prophetic interpretation, often called Chiliasm. But of course, Chiliasm, or the millennial reign of Christ, the emphasis upon that, as we also said in a recent video, goes at least as far back as Justin Martyr in the 2nd century. So Reeves is very good when it comes to the speculation that was going on in the late Middle Ages. Then there's this book, which was one of the few books I've read twice. Iain Murray, The Puritan Hope. I read it in the last year or two that I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I read it again years later. Profited immensely by it both times. You know what Iain Murray does in this book. I should read you his sleeve note just to give you a sense of what he's trying to accomplish in this book. Views on the future prospects of the Christian Church in history have differed drastically during the various periods of her life since Pentecost. In certain eras of darkness and chaos, Christians have anticipated no future save that to be ushered in by the imminent second advent of Christ, while at other times conviction has gripped the church that the gospel in which she believes is yet to be a world-transforming power. It was owing to the Puritans that the latter outlook became dominant in Britain, British Christianity, for over 200 years. How this occurred and how widespread was the influence of their hope is the subject of this volume. After tracing some of the salient features of the Puritan revival age, the author goes on to show how their witness reverberated through the succeeding centuries. As late as 1874, John Richard Green could write, quote, "The whole history of English progress since the Restoration on its moral and spiritual sides has been the history of Puritanism," unquote. And beyond Britain, first in North America, then in India and Africa, the confidence which stemmed from the theology of the Puritan school inspired the greatest missionary advance since the apostolic era. We should intrude here that the dominant strain of Puritan interpretation of prophecy was what we call today postmillennialism. It's a very minority view today. There was also a very strong premillennial strain among the Puritans. So this confidence he's talking about has something to do with the way they viewed the second coming. Back to Murray. Today the church's hope in respect to her mission of discipling all nations is again in eclipse. The world gives Christianity no future, and evangelicals themselves doubt whether the cause of Christ can ever attain to a greater triumph before the second advent. Must the prospects for succeeding generations be darker than those of today? Can we even expect any period of history to intervene before the advent of Christ? How can readiness for Christ's coming be consistent with the belief that revivals are yet to be given to the church? Such questions are brought to the fore in this book, and the author, employing both exposition of Scripture and much historical and biographical material, sets out the case for believing that it is not orthodox to indulge in gloom over the prospect for Christianity in the world. Iain Murray has been a very influential church historian for decades, and I owe him a lot myself, and his analysis in this book is sobering because what he sees in his lifetime, going back now to the 1930s, is this taking over of prophetic speculation by the premillennial, or more specifically the dispensational strain of prophetic interpretation. And of course beyond that there's the cults and their wild rides. So what he's worried about is that while we're all messed up with the future and differing with each other and even dividing the church over the future, that is the interpretation of prophecy regarding the future, we are of no earthly use. Unlike the Puritans, who probably affected, as he claims in here, the British Empire more than any other factor. Their dynamic faith, their belief that the cause of Christ must go forward, their view of the inerrancy and infallibility of Scripture, and that the Christians play the primary role in God's purpose, gave them the kind of strength and moral courage to do what they did. And as he claims in here, and as historians who were not Puritans often claim, what they did was change the face of the Western world, not just Britain, but America and all the other colonies. And to this day, the confidence and strength, I believe he's right in this, the strength of the Western world is a Puritan backbone. Some will differ because they have heard only bad things about Puritanism, but that was me too when I was a Jehovah's Witness. Iain Murray, The Puritan Hope.